All right, let's go ahead and kick things off. Again, welcome to our webinar today. This is the Acuity Hearing Network webinar series. My name is Cade Simpson. I'm a part of the Acuity Hearing Network, and I've got my buddy and colleague with me today, Lowell Scott. He's the owner and operator of Acute Hearing based out of Cincinnati. They have, what do we got these days, Lowell? 21 or 22 clinics?
We'll have 20 by the end of the year. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they're in Ohio, Kentucky, and even down in South Carolina. He started a little region of clinics. And so today we brought Lowell on. Again, he's a good colleague and buddy of ours. We've been working with him for some time, and we've got a fun topic for you. Before we get going into that topic, let me remind anyone that doesn't know, or inform anyone that doesn't know, and remind people that do, who Acuity is. So Acuity Hearing Network, we are a team of people and a business that exists to provide proprietary connected resources to audiology, hearing aid dispensing clinics. We come from a lineage of owning and operating clinics across the country. And so we've got a lot of hands-on first degree experience, and we've developed those tools and resources into products that we're able to share and provide to the community of America today. So we also still own clinics. We operate clinics in Florida, Tennessee, and we've got a clinic in Oklahoma. So we're still in the middle of it. We're putting our our actual words to work and into action, and continuing to thrive in the space in the better hearing market. All right, let's get started, Lowell. Today's topic is breaking free from third parties. Third parties, they're one of the big elephants in the room, right? You go to a conference, it's all people talk about is third parties. And today we're going to talk about breaking free from them. And I believe that Lowell has a good story. I've got a good story to tell about third parties and how they've been a part of our businesses over the years. The way this is going to go today, it's not just going to be a one-way lecture. It's going to be like a podcast. Lowell and I are going to behave like any podcast you've seen, where we've got prompts and questions that we'll dive into and go down rabbit trails on, all based around this idea of breaking free from the third parties. So I've got slides, but the slides are they're questions and prompts to give us instigation into what we might discuss and what avenue we might go down as it relates to third parties. What I'd ask of you in attendance today, if you have particular questions as we go, as it relates to third parties, please, please, please feel free to type them into the chat, and we will get to them as best we can. So know that the chat is open for typing and inserting any opinion or question that you have. And like I said, we'll try to get to them as best you can. All right, Lowell, let's get going. Breaking free from third parties. Let's start like this, Lowell. I was thinking about this discussion and sort of setting the foundation on my experience and your experience on how third parties even came to be. Like, when was the first time you can remember having a third party patient in any of your clinics? Like, when did it hit your radar?
2014 or 15, I guess. Initially when it first came, and it wasn't that the patients were coming into my company at that time, or offices at that point. It was that when we were going to the state associations, they were wanting you to sign up for them and do that kind of stuff when they first started coming out. So initially we weren't getting much from them. They were just trying to get going with them. So it may have been earlier than that. It had been a long time ago. I stayed out of it for a while. I just resisted getting into them. I didn't want to get into them because of the way I didn't think it would be fit the business model that I'm trying to live into. So It's hard for me
Yeah.
to think back. Time goes by so quick. So may have been even as early as 2010. I'm not sure, but
Yeah, I was trying to remember. I was a clinician at the time. I just started in a kind of leadership level, but I was still like a player coach. And I remember, I believe it was 2012, and a true hearing patient came through the door. It happened that the person had an insurance plan that had true hearing. And so we kind of figured it out. It was like it was one or two people that year. And then it felt like it was, 10 the next year, and then a few more and a few more. And it really started to ramp up. But I remember when it was just one, it was just one or two. So okay, we'll dabble in that. We'll see what this is about. Maybe, the idea, was it not the case, to some degree for you, that the idea is to capture potentially a new segment of the market. It's like, okay, here's people maybe we can capture that we weren't appealing to before. Yeah, the transaction's not ideal, maybe on the financial side of things from the get-go. It's not hard to see, but okay, maybe we can make it work. Would you agree with that, or say it differently?
I think that's the initial thing, is the initial fear of missing out on something. I resisted it for a long time just because I felt like when it really came to play in the offices after the person came in, it wasn't like they were sending me anybody. It was more like after they would come into the office, they would go, "Oh, I got this particular thing," and then, uh, that's why I resisted signing up forever on it. And then we were just dealing with them in that way. But for sure, it was the fear that you're going to miss out on stuff. I mean, that's what started driving it. And you're like, okay, pretty soon, what am I not going to be able to fit any hearing aids because all these people belong to it and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. What, when did you really adopt it and say, okay, we're going to give this a try? When was that?
2017 was the first year we ever took any of them.
So that leads me to our first prompt that we'll use. So here's the question. What ways did you try to make it successful? Like, what were some of the strategies of implementing them? It's beyond just saying, okay, we're accepting third parties. No, how did you try to make it a viable part of your business model? And talk about what worked and what didn't work, and why or why not.
Um, well, the reason we started getting into them is because the providers were complaining that they were feeling like they were losing our patients. So, for a long time, Ford was a company that would just give us they would have a $1,500 benefit, and that we would get $1,500. And that year they shifted to, um, I think it was True Hearing that they shifted to. So the providers were so worried about losing the people that they were having that we went into, we decided to join and go from there. And how we tried to make it work is that we sold service packages with them. We did we changed it from a service package, and we did a verification package is how we did it, to where that when at the end of the time of the delivery, we would go ahead and charge them a $365 um, service charge, but basically tell them that we're going to do verification and real ear, and we actually even talked to Hearing Care Solutions and True Hearing, because some of the providers were like, we can't charge them because you have to give them free for service. And we're like, well, this isn't technically service. This is, we're verifying that the hearing aids actually fit. And we did have permission from Hearing Care Solution and True Hearing to charge them for that verification package. Um, then we would sell them annual service packages from that point on. Um, and we did generate a lot of revenue doing that, but it wasn't enough to offset the amount lost on it.
Well, that's
Did they
what you
work?
learned ultimately, right? That's what
Yeah,
you ultimately learned, is that even though it was a new revenue stream, that's kind of a punchline here about breaking back away from them, is that you learned that it was actually cannibalizing. But keep talking about, the early stages of making it work, and the strategies such as the service plans. Like, did you do anything with your schedule? Like, where they could only come in on a certain day, or was it kind of Wild West on put them in wherever?
We never did go to a certain day schedule. We were kicking near the end when we started, before we left, we started looking at, okay, how do we control the schedule? Because it was booking our schedules up so much. So we started looking at, okay, are we going to take block scheduling and put them here and there? And I was talking to some other people that had success with it. Um, it's a different, to me, it's a different business model. I've talked to people that do it and do it very successfully. Um, but it's like, to give you an idea, they have 20 locations in Chicago, but only two providers, because it's just a numbers game. And so they, uh, they have the spread out of the offices to where that they can get a lot of referrals, but they all send them to these only two locations. So there is a way to make it work. I do think it's a viable, but it's not the world that I live in. The world that I live in, I want to give best hearing and work towards doing that. And it's hard to do. And that's why we kept running into issues with it, because to schedule people and then do real ear and do the stuff that we're doing, they needed to get into a verification package because I needed to do real ear. We needed to do follow-up. We'd like to see everybody every 3 months. Um, we spend 20 minutes with them. So we're trying to live into that boutique type style of business. Um, and that just, and the two just they didn't mix very well. But to try to make it work, we sold service packages. We tried to limit how often the people would come in, um, that kind of thing. But it was very difficult to make, in my opinion, to make work well.
Yeah, that I'm going to switch slides again because that really relates to what this question is asking, which is how are the third parties threatening your business or counterproductive? I want to answer a little bit of that, just to say in my own words, kind of what you're saying. This is an important distinction in deciding to not take third parties, for example. What is your business model? That's a rhetorical question, for our audience. What is your business model? Lowell's business model, um, our business model, the business model that we prefer the most, the way we operate our clinics. I'm going to call it, when you agree with this, Lowell, we're better hearing, we're best hearing model clinics, boutique, use that word, versus let's sell as many hearing aids as we can. Like, we barely even count how many units we've done. What we count the most is how many patient visits we had and how many people we've treated. Treatments matter, not units. Anyway, and we want to connect lives. I'll share that in the clinics that we own and operate. That is our purpose statement, is to connect lives. I'll expand a little bit. Connect lives through best hearing. Lowell's purpose statement, if you don't mind me sharing, Lowell, is empowering lives through best hearing. Very similar, very cohesive, type of purpose statements. And there's nothing in there about, how many units we can sell, but rather the quality of life that we can improve. And so that's the hilltop we want to claim, and having that strategy, that decisive strategy to be unique and niche. We're not trying to be everything to everyone. And it took some time to realize ultimately that that's not what you're doing when you accept third parties. We've found it to
Yeah.
be counterproductive because of what happens in the clinic, especially with the clinician. They cannot separate it. They can't put one hat on of boutique hearing and then go over here to the third party, which is handcuffs. It handcuffs them, and what it does is it makes them overwork the activity that they're given to the third party patient, when it really needs to be just kind of cut and dry, deliver and go, to keep it from the business side, a profitable, viable way of doing things. And it's just too much of a competition with each other to do it in the same building. What would you say to that? How are third parties threatening your business or counterproductive? You already kind of started, but keep going on more of how that felt.
Well, it definitely affected the providers. I think the biggest issue was um, the biggest issue was I think the providers felt disingenuous or dishonest with the patients, so they had a hard time with that. Um, I, I to be honest, the more I looked at it, the more I looked at it, I felt like it was putting me out of business. I watched my revenue go down every year. My patient numbers were going, like the in 2021, we had almost 38,000 um, completed appointments. So 22 halfway through the year, we were at 21,000. So our wait time went up to where what we measure wait time to where how long it takes for a new patient to get in. It was drastically increasing. The revenue was going down. Um, the more and more units were transitioning into third party versus private pay.
Yeah.
And one of the big things about it, and I know you got a slide on this later, but one of the big things about it is that we were getting referrals, but that wasn't where the bulk of the business was coming. It was coming from they were taking our current private pay people because they would just be our current patients, and when they were being transitioned into that to the fitting fee. So
Yeah.
that was really killing us. The revenue was dropping consistently, and yet we were getting busier and busier and busier. And so I felt like I needed to hire people, but I didn't have any money to hire people because the revenue was dropping.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
I want to throw this in law, kind of going back to the strategies of how you tried to make it work. One of the strategies that people have tried, I've seen a bunch of people do this, where, okay, we're doing marketing. We're spending our hard-earned money and budgeting for lead acquisition marketing. A bunch of people, everybody on this that's in the audience right now, and the people that'll be watching this webinar in the future, you're operating clinics and you're spending your hard-earned money on lead acquisition marketing. And a patient comes in, let's say you did an open house kind of mailer or a Facebook ad or a newspaper ad or something, and you get an appointment and you find out they have a third party. That's what you're describing. They happen to have a
yeah,
third party as part of their insurance. And that's different than the person that True Hearing literally sends as a referral to your clinic. And so one of the strategies that we tried, you tried, people try, is to kind of keep that wall between it, where if they come in and they have a third party, let's try to work with it. Let's try to match it if we can, or give a discount, or explain the difference between here's the bare bones service you get with the third party, fees and services included, and then here's the robust best hearing package. It's worth more. It costs more because it's worth more. It's not same. Anyway, we tried to put a wall between it. And that was one of the strategies, is if they come in referred, don't poach them. We want to be respectful to True Hearing and HCS and whoever the third party is. We're going to be respectful. We signed up and agreed. But when they come in from our own marketing that we spent our hard-earned money on, that's not True Hearing's patient. That's our patient. We want to know what their insurance is, but we want to try to match as best we can, or take a shot at, let me tell you about best hearing and why that's important. And what you're just describing is what was happening is that got skipped, and the clinics were taking those people and putting them over here in the third party, and it began to chew the legs out of the revenue and therefore the blood of our existence. It just made the margins thinner and thinner. One of the
yeah.
prompts, go ahead.
I was gonna say, when you look at it, is like, we track our cost per appointment and everything, and it's running about $280 this year. Um, well, you get we are averaging the last year we took it, the average referral or fee or fitting fee was $263.
Mhm.
So you can't really live in that world. It's cost you more to get that patient in and give it to them than to get a fitting fee. So
Yeah.
um, those were the challenges that we were running into with it. Not to mention the providers, as they initially begged for it, but it got to where it was eating their schedule up so much, and the issues that it created, they didn't like it either. That's Um, they just didn't like it at all.
That's a good distinction. Yeah, I think for people again that are watching or be watching this webinar, third parties can be a strategy. If you're a new business or you're opening a new clinic in an area and you'll take anything. I mean, we just need some action. We need some kind of revenue. We need to start building up some sort of database. That doesn't mean that you're abandoning your core strategy and core customer. You're just, you can say yes because there's no one on the schedule. But once you get to maturity with a clinic, like most of yours are, well, now you've got enough stuff coming in from your own lead acquisition. You don't need the referrals anymore. That's one aspect of it. You just don't need them. And it's making the people that you paid good hard-earned money to bring in lead acquisition, it's making them wait longer, making the show rates worse, and just giving cholesterol into the clinic. So that parlays into this question: how are third parties affecting your conversion rate and your profitability? I want to answer something on the profitability, and then I'll actually show the slide of that data slide, Lowell. On profitability, this is something that I believe it's sneaky, because you add third parties to your business and it is a new revenue stream. It's like you went from hearing aid revenue and service revenue. That's how you lived your whole life. And then all of a sudden these third parties come around and boom, it's another category, on the revenue section of your P&L. And so it looks like it's all margin. There's no cost of goods. There's no marketing if it's a pure lead, for sure. And okay, we've got straight margin on this thing. It's new gross margin. That's great. But you're letting the secret analysis, the real analysis out of the bag there, Lowell, when people realize, if you're selling someone in a third party, if you're fitting someone through a third party, but it was your lead acquisition, that just made the math backwards. Immediately made it backward. You spent more to get them in than you're getting out of that fee. You can't be taking up only a few $100s of fitting fee. And I know that all of them vary a little bit, but you can't just take a few $100s, so to speak, on a fitting fee when you paid a few hundred. It just doesn't, the math doesn't work in the long term. And then on the conversion rate side, yeah, technically you might have more people saying yes, but the ASP part goes down. I want to show that data slide, Lowell, because this number represents maybe it's the pillar of the decision of letting them go and how it was cannibalizing your revenue. I'll give a little orientation to this report and these numbers, and then you can elaborate more, Lowell. This report, I know for the audience, it's hard to read or impossible to read the headings at the top of the slide, but one of the things that Acuity Hearing Network does, we have very proprietary metrics that we perform. We don't take standard metrics out of any operating system, whether it's Counselor, Blueprint, Cycle, doesn't matter. We take the raw data out and we put it in our own proprietary view. And so this report is a report that we use and our clients use that are subscribing to it. And it allows us to objectively measure what's going on in a clinic from a workflow standpoint. There's a lot of data on here. We're not going to go through every column. What's important to understand for the punchline of this slide is what is being showed here in bold, blown up, is the completed amount of service appointments that were referred by a third party. And then next to it is how many third-party transactions came from those service visits. The number should speak for themselves. We had 87 people that were our own patients already. That's it. That itself is interesting. They were our own patients already, and the third party reached out somehow, talked to them, and they end up being referred by the third party. That in itself is a discussion. But we end up with 191 transactions. how in the world do we have more transactions from service visits in the third party world than what was referred? Elaborate more on that about how it felt when you discovered this lull and what it meant to you and what you understood from it from a business analysis.
Well, we had a gut feeling that this was happening. It all comes down to the mindset of the provider. Um, as it gets very difficult for the provider to set in that world. Now, it's some people can do it, but we had very few of roughly 20 providers, and to get them to be able to take that person and keep them in the out of the third party or upgrade them into a different system. In the back of their head, they're going, well, they can get this hearing aid for free, and get me, or they have a hard time just justifying in their mind selling them. In it. So what ended up happening when a patient would come in and they would say, well, I got this third party, the providers would just, most of them just fell into this. Would get some that would upgrade them into a little bit better technology, but most of the time they ended up just getting with the regular fitting. So what ended up happening is anytime they had that conversation, they would just move them into the third party. And so these numbers, we had that gut feeling, these numbers just proved it. It was worse than what we thought. And the year before, we had the same thing. We only had 92 that were referred. Again, they were our current patients that were referred to us because, like, in one of our offices, what was happening that we had two or three Aetna Medicare insurance salesmen, and what they would do is they were really effective in their area. So one office would come in and everybody had this particular type of insurance, and it was because that guy was selling everybody on that particular type of um, Medicare supplement. And so everybody that was around there had it. So just about every patient that came in. So even if they private paid from us from a year before, this guy would sell them this insurance program that on the idea that they had a hearing aid benefit, um, which we don't call them third parties in our world now. We talk to them about being managed care, but it's
Yeah.
a scenario that with that process, they were just taking people that were already our patients that we already paid for, and we actually in some cases we had fit them two or three times previously, and now because of their excitement of getting some kind of hearing aid benefit, and they were told they got a $3,000 benefit, which we all know that's not the case. It ended up being more and more people just kept being moved over, and as you can see, it just kept taking over more and more of the business.
Yeah, I want to reiterate these metrics that we're showing there, there's a lot of metrics up there at the top in the small print. These are Lowell's real metrics of his business. And just to say, Lowell, I am appreciative of you being vulnerable and letting us put this out there to show folks, because it was real. It's real life that what's going on here, what we measured, and I'm appreciative of being able to share it. And also to say for anybody that's on the audience today or that watches this in the future, if you're interested in having an analysis like this ran to see what's going on in your business, then by all means we can do it. That's what we do. And we'll just run the report. You can make whatever decisions you want. We'll help you analyze it if you'd like. Let's switch to another, and this is similar on the metrics of things, but the percentage of revenue coming from third parties. You said it a little bit earlier. On that slide we were just looking at, if you did the math, it showed that there was 271,000 in third party fitting fee revenue just through half the year, up against just under 4 million of total revenue, which makes the percentage about 7%. So that was 2022, halfway through 2022. 7% of revenue was third-party fitting fees. What was it in 2021, 2020, 2019, and on back from when you had started?
It was at like 3% in 17, then it stayed around 3%, and then 2020, it started increasing more and more, um, to where it was like 4%, 5%, then 7%. It gradually kept increasing. So we started out fairly low with it, and initially that's why I think it deceives people about it. The other side to it is the revenue is really, really low, but the trend, even in 2022 is 10% of the revenue, but it was 35% of the units that we ended up doing.
Yeah.
So even though that you end up having to do so much work for them to do it, but the revenue is so much lower. Um, that's another part that I think gets missed, is that um, your revenue may go up a little bit, but you're getting so little revenue for the time spent, or the units that you end up doing. They just take up more and more time
Well,
on it.
over time, it cannibalizes revenue. It only
Right.
increases revenue when you have holes in your schedule that you're filling with it. But if your schedules
Right.
are already full, it over time cannibalizes it. Like on that report that you're looking at, your revenues got flat. I mean, they were flattened out.
Yes.
Your appointments were going up, your units were going up. The percentage for sure of third party units of total units was going up. Patient
Yeah.
count was going up, revenue flat. I mean, that's cannibalization. That's cannibalization all day long. Let's
Yeah.
transition this way. Oh, go
Actually,
ahead.
the revenue was slowly dropping. I mean, it was like it would lose about um, 2 or 3%, 4% a year, as it kept, and we kept getting busier and busier, but the revenue kept going down slowly, and it's such a
Yeah.
slow
Well,
creep
that's
on
even
you that
worse.
it sneaks up on you. You don't recognize it,
Yeah.
um, and it takes a while for it to sink in.
So when we had been measuring and gnawing at the idea of what if we don't do third parties, and we get to the middle of 2022, and we're running that report and we're looking at it, and it's like, okay, this is not good. We're staring, letting them go in the eye, and trying to get the confidence up to make that switch. Because again, it's a lot of people, it's a lot of
Yeah.
appointments. It's not zero revenue. It's in Lowell's business, a significant size business. It was $500,000 of revenue. That's deleting a clinic. It's significant. So let's talk about that. It's that summertime 2022, and you're thinking about making the switch. What was scary about it? What concerns did you have? If I make this switch, what are the potential cons of the way that this could go sideways?
Well, it's just the fear of the unknown. You're like everybody. Every manufacturer is telling you that third parties are here to stay, and they're going to take over and become more and more into the industry and that kind of stuff. So just the fear of the unknown, worrying about whether or not you're going to be able to you're going to be able to sell to people, because you hear so much about providers, and there's this mindset that, well, I can't compete with free. They're getting a free hearing aid. How can I compete with it? Um, and so that mindset of trying to sell somebody a hearing aid that when they have one that they could get, was a challenge that we had to work through, and how we're going to talk to patients, I mean, to the providers about doing it. Um, so that's the big fear, is, are you going to be able to actually move people into them? Are you going to be able to do it? And I can tell you from that, you can. It's something that we've gotten to where we're doing very well. Um, so it's a, I mean, to be honest with you, when you look at, that was the big concern about what would people actually do it? And it's like 68% of our current business have a third party that we sell them around the third party. It's not like we don't deal with them every day. It's like it's almost 70% of the transactions that we have are they private pay, but they buy the hearing aids through us instead of going through their third party.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
a different skill set.
Yeah. It is. I want to stay parked on the concerns part. We'll unpack that. What has been the results here in a minute, Lowell. On the concerns, it is tough when it's a significant amount of revenue, a significant amount of appointments. And it's like it makes you, I mean, this is true for me, so I'll say it this way. You speak for yourself. It made me nervous and even question if our business model is viable. Like, is this actually, kind of at the deepest dungeons of thought about it, is our business model viable? Or is this gonna, is the third party gonna win?
For sure. You 100% you were going through that. I was looking at the way that we were trying to do it, it wasn't a long-term option in my opinion, because I mean, realistically, it just kept getting the it became so evident that we were going in the wrong direction, that it wouldn't work the way it was working. I mean, that's the bottom line. Is it
Yeah.
like I was going to go out of business quicker by doing them, and I was worried about that more because you could see the revenue going down, expenses weren't, profitability was getting really really tight. Um, all because of the fact that it's sure, if you're living in that world, you guys understand it. It's you start to see everything shrink because you're so busy taking care of these third party or these managed care stuff that aren't paid, and you can't do this. And I wasn't equipped, and nor did I want to just push hearing aids. I've never done it that way. I've been doing this, for 35 years, and it's always been about best hearing. It's not about me selling hearing aids. It's not what I do. So I don't just want to push hearing aids out the door. I want to give
Yeah.
people a chance and work with them. So
Yeah.
there was a lot of fears about it, but I had as many fears on the other side, because it was becoming very clear. The picture was getting painted very clearly that it was going to. I didn't think it was a long-term process. Either I had to completely change my structure of business, or third parties were gonna cause it to where I couldn't make any money.
Yeah. I'm just, reminiscing back, just so proud of that move
Yeah.
because it is hard. Here's what we did though. We did math. We did a lot of math,
Yes.
lots of math, lots of pro forma and projection and scenarios. What if this scenario? What if this scenario? What if we can convert 1 out of 10 of them or whatever, to a private pay? And
Right.
we ultimately concluded that the risk of getting rid of them will be worth the reward. I want to talk about the actual results of what happened once you got rid of them. Let's answer this question. I just said we did a lot of math, and so I think that's important. And let me add that, Lowell. That's a pro mature, level-headed, strategic thinking owner move to be objective, to do that math and make the decision. I feel like it's so common that people are stuck. They're fearful of it, and so they don't go the next step to do the math or think it through how it could work, and therefore they just keep taking it. It's like, well, let's make a plan. It doesn't mean it's perfect, but let's make a plan and does it fit the strategy and what's the best move for the company? And sometimes you got to make hard decisions. So just really proud of the move. And ultimately, like I said, we're going to talk about the results, and it's easy to be proud when the results are good. Talk about
Yeah.
those, well, the steps that you took with the team to get it ready. Because you can't just call the team and say, or send out an email or a text to everybody and say, hey, no more third parties. That's not what you did. So what did you do? Tell us what you did.
We had to perfect a talk track, to help patients the providers get around it. We had to start uh, talk to them about that. What the we really had to do a lot of conversations about attitude, about that the providers bring value to and they're the part of it. Because if you don't believe that the provider brings value into this process, then it's all about the hearing aid. And so we had to do a lot of education and conversations about and bring up stats and prove to the providers that they were the most important link in this process, not the hearing aid. The hearing aid's a tool that we use to get to better hearing, but it wasn't that. We came up with talk tracks. We came up with pricing tools that showed
Yeah.
the discounts and stuff on it we had to have so that they would do it. So a lot of it was just preparing each person for that. And then it was, we started giving them heads up to it, but talking to them why. And they were already seeing it eating up their schedule. They were already seeing the problems with it and how they couldn't continue to do it. Because we tried to do the whole thing where we sold them something different, and they would feel a lot of pressure because we kept track of everything that they did. You're right. We did a ton of math on it. We looked at the marketing and what was working and what wasn't, but I think the biggest thing, the hardest thing we had to do is to get the team with the mindset that this is what's best for the patient. They bring value to the patient, and they're the most important tool to the success of the patient. And if they believe that, and they believe we're given better hearing, then you can actually move the team forward with that. That was probably the hardest thing that we did.
Yeah. I'll summarize it. Tools, you got all the tools ready. All the
Right.
tools, comparative tools, sales tools, service plan package tools, all the tools, including documented talk tracks, patient intake forms, all of that stuff. And then the meeting rhythm and the communication with the team. And
Right.
it's like that moment in time, that season in time, is probably, in recent years, it's like that was the most significant reinvigoration of who we are. Who are we as a company? What is our purpose? And reminding ourselves of that, let's get our tools and march into battle head on. And here's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing it without third parties. You set a date and you begin to cancel contracts or whatever that, agreements or whatever, and you moved forward. There was a little hesitation. It's like just like we had to go through the kind of, oh my gosh, hopefully this works. Kind of the fears and concerns. So did the clinic teams, because you get institutionalized into having it be part of you. And even though they'd complain about it, but it's like, I'll add that little aside. This might be one of the biggest answers to or employee feedback ever. It's like no one was enjoying it. There is no one on the team that was like, yay, we love this. Everybody's saying it's a nag. Okay, we'll answer your feedback and we'll get rid of it. And then when you get rid of it, it's like, wait. It's like they get a little fearful, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. We've got I think we've got a chat question, Lowell. Maybe it relates to this. Yeah, Ronza's asking, how long did the transition take?
The whole thing was probably till we got, we ended up stopping in September of that year. So we were doing the math really heavy in June.
We didn't start then though. That was kind of peak math season. We had been doing some analysis all along. Yeah.
Right. But I would say when we started thinking about whether we're going to do it, it was from March or so, because then we started looking into the numbers. September, we actually stopped doing it. And it probably, before we got good at it, it was definitely the rest of the year. By January and February, we started moving in our E-factors, our close rates started getting back up to where they were before we dropped it. I would say that if at the point you say, I'm going to stop today, it probably took 6 months to get the team around it. It would have been easier if I was the only clinician. If it's just you doing it, that it'll go quicker because you only have one person to convince of it.
Right. Yeah.
But part of the process is that with the locations that we have changing everybody's mindset, because the biggest challenge they had then is, what am I going to say to these guys that we've been giving all this stuff to free? What am I going to say about that? And that was the hardest thing to get the providers to do. It took us a little while to do it.
Yeah, that speaks. Maybe elaborate a little bit more. Ronza's got another question. She's asking, what type of pushback did you receive from staff, and how did you handle it? You're kind of touching on that when you're talking about the months right after canceling it, where they're kind of hesitant.
I don't know that by that point, I don't know that we got a lot of pushback. It was just working through their fear. They had the same fears about, oh, what am I going to do now? I can't do this. Nobody who can do this. And it was just showing them, giving them the pathway and showing them each step to how to do it, giving them the talk tracks. One of the things that really helped with patients is when you're sitting there talking to them, and it became, when we were saying, look, we were forced to leave because they wouldn't allow us to do Real Ear. They wouldn't allow us to do Bosu. So they wouldn't allow us to fit the hearing aids that we were needed. So we were forced out of the scenario. And most patients, if you're doing those things, once you show that, they're okay with it, but it's getting the providers to believe it. So I don't know that we got a lot of pushback because nobody liked dealing with third parties. But it did take a while to give them the tools and the understanding and the talk to where they could talk through this scenario when a patient was right there. That was a challenge, and how, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I would categorize it like this, that the pushback was not in the conversations weren't, this is dumb, I can't believe you did that pushback. The pushback was their fear. It was oh, I don't know if we can do this. I've forgotten, they're not saying these words, but I've forgotten my own value. I've forgotten how to differentiate. I've quit doing verification and Real Ear and looking in people's ears and all that. And so this was one of the things that you did also in the steps afterward, is like you got all the tools prepared and had communication, and then boom, there's the go live date of no more. And forward, you set up significant meeting rhythms and a lot of one-on-one, like all the trainings were about that. And I mean, remember this, like all of the support team was released, and you had a schedule of who was going to go work with who to talk through and practice and role play those conversations. And that was heavy in those first 3 to 6 months after.
Yeah, we actually went out and demonstrated it for them, and we would actually run it with them, and so we could show them that we'd be done. So instead of me just saying, well, you can do it this way, is that we would go out and show them and have success with them, and then they would go, oh, well, if you can do it, I can do it, kind of scenario. So that was part of it, is proving to them that it's possible to do, because if they're questioning or they got fear about stuff, they don't have the confidence to create that urgency and that desire for the patient, because they do have to create a sense of urgency to get the patient to move forward.
Yeah. I want to remind the audience that's here, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. Another thing that you can do, if the chat's a little cumbersome, there's a button that looks like a hand. It's a raise hand button. If you click that, it'll show next to your name, and we can unmute you to ask your question live to answer. We're going to be wrapping up here in a few minutes, but there's certainly enough minutes for some more Q&A if anyone has any. So be sure to get your questions in the chat, or click the raise hand if you have a specific question that you'd like to know. Lowell, let's switch to this. Talk a little bit more about okay, you're a clinician, you're in the room, and a patient has third party. Give some of the nuts and bolts of that conversation and the key points that you're training your staff to communicate when the patient's got a third party benefit.
Well, we call it managed care. We don't call it third party. I think that there's a distinction there because I think uh, first and foremost, patients have no idea what third party means. They don't have any
Yeah.
idea have no idea what that means. They do have a pretty good idea what managed care means, that it's a limited way of doing stuff. It's not like a true benefit that you can take the money and just go somewhere and take that and get anything you want. You have to go through their steps and through the insurance's process. So changing that in our talk track made it easier because we didn't have to educate the patient as much because they kind of had an idea what managed care was. We don't really get into, we'll take their stuff, but one thing that we really encourage our providers to do is to not talk at all about insurance whatsoever until the very end. We're talking about initially all we're doing is taking in and gathering information. We need to do the hearing test. We need to figure out what's going on. We talk about hearing loss. We talk about the effects of hearing loss long term and that kind of thing. And so it has to be about best hearing and has to be about that. Not has anything to do. We do not talk about hearing aids really in the process. We talk about treatment. I don't get into the brands or styles of what it is to where at the very end and the person recognizes that they have a hearing loss and that they're ready for treatment. And then we'll give them our pricing tool that has like a good, best, better, best type of scenario on it. And then we ask them which one they want. And then if they ask what their insurance will do, then we will go out and check. They'll run a VOB on it, but we have a cheat sheet that has all the insurances. Like there's 15 or so, maybe more than that now, that we know have they're part of the managed care. And if they are, then we'll go in and come back out and say, here's your benefit, what you get for it, and here's what your out-of-pocket expense is. And then they go from there and they end up
Yeah.
purchasing from that.
I feel like the things that you're saying are so profound. They seem subtle, but they are so profound because as a total theme, by not taking the third parties, what we found, using Lowell's business as an example, here's 2 years later, the self-confidence that the teams have on who they are and what they're providing has returned. They know that they are a best hearing facility and a best hearing clinic to give people their best and not be confused. Right. And so those little things that are so profound, like not talking about insurance. For example, like when they come in, we're not spending a million hours verifying everybody's benefit necessarily. In fact, like in our clinics, in my clinics, they only verify benefit after a person has said yes. So for instance, you make the recommendation, well, what does my insurance cover? Well, what we recommend is you choose something that you can comfortably afford. We will check your insurance in the meantime before your delivery, and what benefit you have coming, we should be able to file it. If there's any hiccups or anything, we can always change the order, but you should choose something you can comfortably afford. You need to hear better. Which do you prefer? That's the essence of the conversation, and it just drives and brews up more and more self-confidence. Whereas if you're always looking, well, what does the insurance cover? What does insurance cover? That pulls you back the other way, the wrong way. So you got to do things that are differentiating and odd maybe, but they lean you towards your core model. It's not perfect. It's not perfect. It's not like everybody's saying yes to us. And now the aggravation that the clinics have is they don't have that kind of easy close, right? They don't have the third party cheap option, the price, the option that we're giving them to, you know, kind of match it or honor their benefit is still expensive. $5, $6, $7,000. It's not cheap, but overall the self-confidence of the clinics and the purity of our business model has returned.
Yeah, I think one of the things that had to happen is, one, we had to increase or change the experience for the patient by being very detailed on what we're going to do. And if you think about it, and we use this analogy a lot with our employees, you know, if you go to a high-end restaurant, how do they exist when they're charging 2 to 3 times more than what somebody that sells the same type of food that sells it for half price? It'd be like it doesn't, you couldn't exist. Well, it's the experience process, and we have to give a different experience to the patient. You know, and that's key. You know, so it's you know, one of the things that hit home to me is I know you guys know this, but um, in Europe, there's a lot of people that sell private pay hearing aids, even though there a lot of them are just given away. It's part of your what you get in their national health care, but they have companies that sell it, and the reason that they can exist is because they do such a much better job. That's a key distinction, that the providers have to believe that they're doing better, and you actually have to produce a better experience for the patient,
Yeah.
if it's going to work.
Yep. Lol, is as a kind of punchline summary, in September of 2022, you quit taking third parties. What, I think you have your report there. What was your revenue in 2022?
It was 7.6 million.
7.6 million. You quit third parties at the end of the third quarter of 2022. In 2023, what was your revenue? Well,
10.2.
and that is so
No,
significant.
yeah,
You know?
and you can sustain it because we're at year to date, we're at 9.6, and we're on pace to hit 11.4 and a half, 11.5, somewhere in that range now. So um,
Yeah,
it's been a positive thing.
and your profits have returned, you know. Dave Dutson is asking, is that with the same stores, no additional clinics? You've added one or two but they were added in 2023 in the middle.
Yeah, we actually I lost a provider. I moved one of the providers. So yeah, I've had the number that we have right now. Um, maybe that was no, that was because I closed the store and opened one up because
Yeah,
I lost a provider and it was
yeah,
in a rough area. So we moved it. So I actually closed one of the stores. So it's the same number of stores.
yeah.
Yes.
Same operating count of stores. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a that was asked just to say to everyone, like, this is not some agenda math thing. This is real math relating to the change of third parties. The ASP went up, revenue went
Yeah,
up, it all went up.
that's something that's RASP in 2022 was 2252. That's on hearing aids. If you include everything, if you include the third parties, it was 1,500. When you look at all the units that we did, and last year it was 2,500 in 2023.
Yeah,
As we
that's
get
it.
better this year, it's 3,000. So we're even getting better as we go. We're getting better at distinguishing ourselves with the stuff that we're doing, and the providers believing in it. It comes down to me, it comes down to what the patients or what the providers believe that they can and can't do. And when they start believing that they're given that experience that's different, and that they're actually saying, well, you can't get what I get, you can't get this anywhere else because we do real ear, the stuff that we do to differentiate ourselves. Um, and they believe that. So when they believe it, it's not a ploy to the patient. The patient believes you because the providers are now believing it, and you can start to see the numbers and come to play.
Yeah. While I'm wrapping up here, if anybody has any follow-up questions, here's mine and Lowell's contact information. Lowell, I am hugely appreciative of you being vulnerable and sharing your information and your story about third parties. So thank you so much for participating in this with us today. Again, Lowell's been a great colleague and friend to be a part of the business world and friendship world with. He runs a pro group of clinics. And so if you have questions you want to ask him directly, there's his contact information. I'm sure you'd be happy to share. And if you have questions or anything for me or Acuity Hearing Network, there's my information, website, and email address. Thanks for everybody that attended today. Hopefully it was informative, enjoyable for you. We'll see you next time on the Acuity Hearing Network webinar series. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. Yep.